Hello, welcome to Lesson 6. Today we're going to be talking about an Evangelism How To, some really practical ideas about how to share your faith, like actual real-world things you can do. Now, last week we talked about sort of the importance of evangelism and sort of challenged the people in your class to be really thinking about one person in particular that they can share their faith with. So hopefully you and your students in your Sunday school class are really excited about wanting to share their faith more. Hopefully the Holy Spirit has convicted them and maybe even revealed to them someone in their life that they can begin praying for and begin looking for gospel opportunities to talk with that person. If you didn't get one already, we printed out some sheets last week that were practical tips for evangelism from the North American Mission Board, the Who's Your One campaign. It's just some really practical ideas about ways you can get started on sharing your faith and how you can start praying for that one person that you're thinking about. So if you don't have one of those already, make sure to grab one. Hopefully there's still some left in your class from last week. If you want more, let us know. We can get more printed out for you here in the church office. So I know that going out and doing evangelism, sharing the gospel with people, it can be a little overwhelming, a little intimidating. So today we're going to talk about some real practical, real life stuff that you can do for that one person, or hopefully for multiple people, not just now, but hopefully these are good habits to learn for the rest of your life as you continue to share the gospel with people. So the number one thing you can do for your lost friends and neighbors is to pray for them. That is easily the best thing you can do for them. Not only is this the best thing for them, but it's actually a very easy thing to do. It doesn't require it doesn't require those awkward conversations or those icebreakers. I mean, you can just pray for these people on your own. It's the easiest thing you can do, and it's one of the most important things you can do when it comes to evangelism. But remember, we're talking about evangelism here, so here's what I want you to pray for. I want you to pray for that person to be open, for their hearts to be open, for their ears to be open to hear the good news, that the Lord would be softening their hearts and preparing them to hear the word. You need to pray for opportunities. Ask God to give you open doors to have those gospel conversations, to be able to naturally bring up the topic of Jesus and salvation and all that good stuff. And here's the deal. If you're going to pray for those opportunities, if you're going to pray and ask God to give you open doors to talk to these people about the gospel, you better believe that He's going to do it. You better be expecting Him to do it and be on the lookout for those opportunities. Maybe you need to pray for the wisdom to recognize that opportunity whenever it's presented. And definitely, if you're anything like me, you have to pray for the boldness to speak up and to actually take those opportunities and to share with your lost friends. The truth is that if we're really going to pray for God to give us chances to tell people about Him, we need to be expecting that He will. And we need to be ready for when that happens. Look at how Paul says he prays for people in Ephesians chapter 3. This is actually pretty awesome. He says, "For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named. I pray that He may grant you, according to the riches of His glory, to be strengthened with power in your innermost being through His Spirit, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. I pray that you, being rooted and firmly established in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the length and width, height and depth of God's love, and to know Christ's love that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with all the fullness of God." Look at the way Paul says that he prays for the people in Ephesus. He prays that they would be rooted in God's love, that they would truly understand just the depths of the love of Christ. He's kneeling down, getting on his knees before the Father to truly, deeply, and sincerely pray for these people. And that's how we need to pray for our lost friends. To get down on our knees and beg the Father that they would truly understand what the love of God really is. It's important to remember this when we talk about evangelism. You can't save anyone. You're not God. Even if you wanted to, you can't save anybody. It's not possible. Your job, your only job, the only thing you can do, the only thing you're supposed to do is just tell people. You can't save people. All you can do is tell people, and then you trust God with what happens next. You pray for them before you talk to them, and if they say no, you pray that you have another opportunity in the future, or you pray that that conversation is a seed that continues to grow in their life. Sometimes you may need to spend years praying for that person before they really are ready to accept the good news. But the most important thing we can do is to pray for people. Another really practical thing you can do to be better at sharing your faith is to learn a gospel presentation. There's not just one way to share the gospel. In fact, when you read through the book of Acts and you see the first Christians going and spreading the gospel all over the world, what you'll notice is that every time they tell someone about how to be saved, they say something different. There's not some script that you're supposed to follow. There's no one way. They didn't memorize anything. They just told people about Jesus and people were saved. Now, over the years since then, Christians have come up with gospel presentations. They're things that can help you to memorize the gospel or memorize something to say, and it can be a really powerful and helpful tool for evangelizing. Maybe you're new at it. This can be a really good starting point to make you more comfortable with sharing your faith. If you're unexperienced in evangelism, sharing your faith with a gospel presentation can help you to make sure you don't leave out something important. It can help you to remember to make sure to include certain things that you want to remember. It's just a good tool. The truth is that whether or not you use a gospel presentation, it doesn't really matter. It's not like right or wrong to use one. What matters is that you make a point of telling people about Jesus. And doing something is better than doing nothing. So if it's going to help you to be more confident to share the gospel and to have gospel conversations with people, to memorize something or memorize an acronym or a script or something like that, go for it. That's great. That's an awesome tool in your tool belt. Now, some examples of gospel presentations that you may or may not be familiar with. There's the Roman Road. The Roman Road is really cool. It's a series of scriptures through the book of Romans that explains how to be saved. There's the Evangelicube. I used to have one. I thought I had one with me. The Evangelicube is this little like fold-up cube, and as you do it, you kind of tell the story of Jesus and his death and resurrection, and it's this neat thing. It works really great with kids. We take it on mission trips when we go to other countries because it's got pictures. There's the 4 spiritual laws. There's the faith outline, which is kind of like an acronym. There's the 3 circles. The 3 circles is really cool. Maybe you've heard of some of these. Maybe someone shared them with you. Maybe you've shared them with someone. Now, a few tips if you're going to use one of these or a different one. Don't get too hung up on having to memorize every single word of it. Remember, these are just tools. These are something that can help you to share the gospel, to help you be more confident. If you don't get it word for word, that's all right. The point of a gospel presentation is to keep it simple so that you can share the good news with someone really clearly, right? So don't get too complicated. Just keep it simple. So practical ideas, ways that you can actually share the gospel with people. Pray for your lost friends. Memorize a gospel presentation. Get it in your brain so that you can get it out of your mouth. Another really important thing, and this is easily the most effective way to be a good witness, it's also the hardest, and it's building relationships. A lot of times when we talk about going out and doing evangelism, we sort of imagine going and sharing the gospel with strangers on a street corner somewhere or in a public place. Maybe it's going and knocking on someone's door. And that's a great way to do evangelism. Many Christian brothers and sisters have been led to Christ that way. I would say as long as we're not, shouting at people, turn and burn kind of stuff, that I would say is not all that effective. But if you're actually talking to people, whether you know them or not, it doesn't matter. You can share the gospel with a stranger. That's a great way to do evangelism, but it doesn't just have to be strangers that you share the gospel with. In fact, sometimes it can even be harder to share the gospel with someone you know really well. Close friends or family members, they know you better than most people know you. They know all of your flaws. They know your past mistakes. And sometimes maybe you're a little hesitant to talk with them because what if it has a weird impact on your relationship or your dynamic? Sharing the gospel with someone that you already know in a lot of ways can be harder than sharing the gospel with a stranger. Now, whether it's someone you've known for a long time or it's someone new, when you share the gospel with someone, you are inviting them into a relationship with the Father. You are inviting them to be adopted into the family. So it makes sense that in order for you to invite them to this relationship, that you would build a relationship with them yourself. Going out of your way to spend time with someone and get to know them will open doors to talk about Jesus. If you're a part of that person's life, you just naturally make friends with them, then the more time you spend with that person, the more you have in common with that person, the more you talk with them, the more chances you're going to have those gospel conversations. After all, we want to share the gospel with people because we love them. And it's because we love them that we want them to know the good news. Also, if the person does accept Christ and become a Christian, it's good for them to have someone they know who can help them grow as a disciple. As great as it is to share the gospel with people, with strangers, that's a really good thing. But there's no follow-up after that because you will likely never see that person again this side of heaven, right? And they are kind of on their own to go find a church or other brother or sister in Christ to kind of help them grow as a disciple. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you already know the person, then not only can you share the gospel with them at first, but you can help them to continue to grow in their walk with Jesus afterwards. Being saved is just the first step in a lifelong process of discipleship. And your friend is a Christian now. And if you're a part of their life and you're the person who led them to Christ, you can help them grow. I mean, think about when you were saved. Who was the person who led you to Christ? Was it a stranger or was it someone you knew? I'm sure there's going to be different answers for the different people in your class, but think about it. If someone you knew led you to Christ, didn't they also help you grow as a disciple? If you were led to Christ by a stranger, by someone you didn't know, who was the person who came alongside you and helped you grow as a Christian afterwards? It's kind of an interesting thing to talk about. I'm sure there's a lot of really good stories in your Sunday school class. So we've got pray for the person, learn a gospel presentation, build relationships, and probably the most important one is have gospel conversations. Look what it says in Romans chapter 10. It says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on him they have not believed in? And how can they believe without hearing about him? And how can they hear without a preacher? And how can they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news." This passage from Romans says it perfectly. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But they can't believe in the gospel if they don't hear it. And they're never going to hear it if no one goes and tells them. God has sent us into the world to be the messengers of his good news. People can't hear about the gospel unless Christians talk to them about it. We have to actually speak up. Having gospel conversations, finding natural ways, natural openings in a normal conversation and just the normal course of life with the people you're around. Having those gospel conversations is the most important thing. Anytime an opportunity presents itself, talk about Jesus. If you don't ever talk about him, then the people around you are never going to hear him. We have to be intentional about having gospel conversations. It won't happen on accident. It's extremely rare that someone comes up to you and just straight up asks, "What must I do to be saved?" It happens. It doesn't happen that much. Now listen, it doesn't have to be with everybody. You don't have to be going around and every person you see, at every grocery store aisle, you just stop them and talk about it. I'm not talking about that, okay? You don't have to share the gospel with everybody, but you do have to share the gospel with someone. Now last week we talked about who's your one. That person who maybe just one person in your life, maybe someone you work with, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, one person who needs to hear the gospel. Hopefully you're praying for that person, but now we need to begin looking for opportunities to talk to that person about Jesus. God, in his wisdom, has chosen us to be the messengers. We don't know why. He knows what he's doing, but he doesn't explain why. He's chosen us to take this message across the world. And there's no plan B. We're it. We are the plan. Christians going and telling non-Christians, non-believers, about how they can be saved. Look at what it says in verse 15. How beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. We are the messengers, taking the good news to the lost people in our lives. There's this awesome passage in Acts chapter 4 where they talk about how they can't stop talking about what they have seen and heard. You don't have to know everything to share the gospel. In Acts chapter 4, some of the apostles they're arrested for preaching about Jesus. And they tell him, look, don't come back here and don't be preaching anymore. And listen to what they say to him. In Acts chapter 4:19, Peter and John answered him, "Whether it is right in the sight of God for us to listen to you rather than God, you decide. But we are unable to stop speaking about what we have seen and heard." They told people about Jesus because they couldn't help it. Jesus had changed their life so much that they had to tell people about him. Use your personal experiences. Use your testimony. We're going to talk more about that next week. You don't have to be a Bible scholar. You don't have to be a professional preacher or missionary. You just have to be saved. A big obstacle for a lot of people in sharing the gospel is the fear that they might be asked a question that they don't know the answer to. And I want you to know this. You can say, "I don't know." Someone might raise an objection and you might not know what to say, and you can just say, "I don't know." The apostles weren't scholars. They weren't wealthy or influential. Some of them weren't even all that educated. They were fishermen. Peter, he was a fisherman. They were just regular people who had been saved by Jesus. Regular people who had been saved by Jesus, and they just couldn't help but tell people. They had to tell people the good news. I heard a missionary say this one time. He was a missionary in Nicaragua, and he was preaching at a youth camp and at Super Summer, and he was talking about going and sharing the gospel, and he says people have all these reasons for not doing it, and he said, here's the truth. If you only know a little, then share a little. And if you know a lot, share a lot. And I thought that was just one of the most one of the best ways I've ever heard anyone put it. You don't have to know everything about God or about the Bible to tell people about Jesus. They said, look, we have to tell people what we've seen and heard. If you know a little, share a little. If you know a lot, share a lot. The point is, just share. So this week, at home, join us on Wednesday nights. In October, Brother Charles is going to be teaching about evangelism. He's going to be talking about ways to go and share your faith. And so on Wednesday nights in October for the adults, come and join us to talk about what it means to do evangelism. And continue to pray for God to give you opportunities to have gospel conversations. Think about who your one is. And maybe start looking for ways that you can start talking to them about Jesus. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Thank you, teachers. You guys are awesome. Remember that you, right here in our church at First Baptist Willis, you are some of the most important disciple makers that we have. You are, you who are teaching our Sunday school classes, you are some of our primary disciple makers, and we're very grateful for you. And we just can't thank you enough for teaching this class and for giving of your time to serve God, to serve His kingdom, and to serve this church and the people of this church. Thank you so much. We will see you next week for lesson number 7, where we are going to be talking about how to share your testimony, your personal testimony. So we'll see you next week.